You're great at what you do, Lenora, just not in the way we need anymore.
And just like that, it was done. I gave this company 17 years of my life, never missed a deadline, never raised my voice. And just like that, I was let go for being too quiet. The air in conference room D was stiff-chilled like a walk-in freezer. Maybe it was the humming of the air conditioner, or maybe it was just the absence of humanity in the room. Sandra Tran, the HR manager, sat across from me, her body turned slightly away like she didn't want to face what was about to unfold. Beside her, Austin Merrick, young smug, dressed in a tailored navy suit, leaned forward with a rehearsed expression of empathy. "Lenora," he began, "you've been with Halcyon Peak for almost 2 decades. Your contributions have been appreciated." I didn't move. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "As you know, we're in the middle of a culture shift. We're looking for leaders who can energize the room, inspire change, drive innovation with presence, and honestly, your style, it's just not aligned with where we're heading." There it was. Not performance, not result style. Sandra reached into a leather folder and pulled out a severance packet. Her hands trembled slightly as she pushed it toward me. "You'll find all the transition details in here. We're offering 3 months severance and extended COBRA benefits." I looked at the packet, then at Austin. Did I underperform? He flinched just slightly. "No, not at all. You were steady. Consistent, just not quite what this moment demands." I nodded. "Thank you." That was all I said. That was all I needed to say. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked out with my head held high. I returned to my office, a place I had made my second home. The corkboard above my desk was pinned with photos from annual retreats printed, thank you notes from staff I had mentored, and faded post-its with words like strategy, integrity, patience. A small ceramic planter sat in the window with a thriving jade plant I had raised since year 3. It was probably older than some of the interns. I began packing slowly. There was no rush. No one came in. No one said goodbye. I heard murmurs in the hallway, the soft hush of avoidance. Only Bill, the janitor who cleaned my office every Thursday night, peeked his head in and said, "You all right, Ms. Blake?" I gave him a small smile. "I will be." With the box of my belongings in hand, I walked the familiar path from my office to the elevator. On the 3rd floor, I passed the open concept marketing zone. Tiffany glanced up from her phone, then leaned toward Josh, whispering something I caught just enough. She never really fit the new vibe. Always so. Stiff, 17 years, and that's what I became a relic. In the lobby, my heels echoed against the marble as I walked past the Halcyon mission statement, etched into glass. Boldness, innovation, community. I almost laughed. Outside, the spring sun in Austin was unusually soft. I stood for a while next to my car, staring at the building's steel and glass facade. Modern, reflective, cold. I reached for my badge. Lenora Blake, Director of Administrative Strategy, and unclipped it. It felt heavy in my hand, like it carried the weight of every late night, every mentorship, every battle I fought silently, so others could rise. I walked to the steel trash bin near the garage entrance and dropped it in without ceremony. I drove home with the windows down. The wind felt grounding. At home, the silence didn't hurt. It enveloped me. My apartment, tucked along Zilka Park, was still sunlit. I placed the box down on my kitchen counter and removed each item like I was unwrapping a story, the mug. The photo of the team from 2014. A handwritten card that read, "You made this place human." As I sat on the couch, I looked around the room that had seen me age gracefully, from ambition to contentment. My bookshelf stood across the room, lined with books I hadn't touched in years. On the top shelf was a worn manila folder, my original Halcyon offer letter signed by the founder himself, back when titles were earned by integrity, not charisma. I brewed peppermint tea, stirred it slowly, then stood on the balcony. Joggers passed below. Cars crawled along Lamar. Somewhere in the park, someone played soft acoustic guitar. I didn't call anyone, didn't cry, didn't post a cryptic message about betrayal or rebirth. Instead, I opened an old leather-bound notebook and wrote, They mistook my silence for weakness. They're about to learn otherwise. Then I turned the page and added, quiet doesn't mean absent, still doesn't mean stagnant. I'm not gone. I'm just repositioning. I closed the notebook, set it beside the mug, and looked out at the slow-fading sky. A warm breeze curled through the doorway, bringing with it the scent of fresh grass and some distant barbecue. It reminded me that the world was still moving, and so was I. And my story wasn't over, not even close. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I woke up without a reason to rush. No inbox waiting. No 8:30 stand-up call. No half-eaten granola bar on the way to my sedan. Just sunlight leaking through the curtains of my apartment and the hum of morning joggers passing Zilka Park. It was a Tuesday. I made a full breakfast for once, scrambled eggs with a little too much chive sourdough toast that I didn't burn and a grapefruit slice like I'd seen in hotel buffets. I sat in silence with a cup of coffee and stared at the calendar on my fridge, still marked with color-coded appointments. Q2, Strategy Review Board Prep, Weekly Sync, Austin. None of those mattered now. I took the magnet off, let the paper flutter to the floor and didn't bother picking it up. There's a strange sense of weightlessness that comes with being cut loose, like you're floating without a tether, but not necessarily flying. I wasn't sad exactly. I wasn't angry either. I was blank. I tried opening my laptop. I logged into LinkedIn for the first time in over 3 years. My photo was outdated, blurry, and professional in that uninspired corporate way. My job title still said Director Halcyon Peak. I clicked to edit it, hovered over the update headline box, and closed the tab. What was I supposed to put? I didn't want to be dramatic with something like open to opportunities or exploring new challenges. That wasn't me. Later that afternoon, my neighbor Ruth knocked on the door. She was 73, wore red lipstick, without apology, and had a chihuahua named Dennis, who hated everyone except me. Thought you might need these, she said, handing me a stack of blueberry muffins. You're not working today. Not working this week, I replied. Ruth didn't ask why. She was sharp enough to guess. Instead, she sat on my balcony, sipped tea, and told me about the time she lost her teaching job at 50 and ended up making more in real estate within 2 years. You know what I learned, she said. Reinvention isn't a young person's game. It's for people who've actually lived. I laughed genuinely for the first time in days. The next morning, Ruth came by again, this time with a business card. Friend of mine, he's in private equity, says they're looking for someone to help untangle a mess at one of their portfolio companies. I frowned. I'm not a consultant, Lenora, she said, raising an eyebrow. You were practically running Halcyon behind the curtain for 10 years. Call it what you like. That night, I reread the card. It was simple. Malcolm Hartley, founding partner. Westbridge Capital. No fluff, no tagline. I looked him up. Older man, Yale grad. Known for quietly fixing chaotic businesses and installing new leadership teams without the mess. I liked the quiet part, I emailed him. Subject line referral from Ruth Carlyle. His reply came within the hour. Would love to talk. Join me for lunch this Friday at South Congress Cafe. I stared at the screen, then at the empty calendar on my wall. This time, I marked it with a pen, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like something worth showing up for. 2 months after they let me go, I still set an alarm every morning. It wasn't because I had somewhere to be. It was because I refused to forget who I used to be. There's something cruel about waking up with no calendar events, no meetings, no emails, and yet still feeling the phantom weight of responsibility. My body still remembered the rhythm of corporate life, even when my name had been erased from the system. Some mornings, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if any of it had mattered. 17 years. Dozens of successful campaigns, late nights, early mornings, quiet wins that never made headlines. Now I was just another woman in a grey sweater waiting for job postings to refresh, but there was a strange kind of clarity in the silence. Without constant noise, I could finally hear the truth. I had been loyal to a system that only valued noise, not substance. I had been devoted, to a culture that rewarded performance, not principle, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of the quiet I was becoming it. The call came on a Tuesday. I almost didn't answer. It was Elise. I hadn't heard from her since the day they let me go, though I knew she hadn't been behind it. Elise had always been steady, capable, and good. Too good to survive, long in the version of halcyon peak media that had discarded people like me. "Lenora," she said, voice low, like she wasn't sure I'd pick up. "I'm here. I hope this isn't a bad time." "It's a time," I said. "That's enough these days." She chuckled nervously. "Look, I'm going to cut straight to it. Are you consulting right now?" I blinked. "I'm between projects. Would you consider taking one on? A big one?" "Halcyon C." "Silence, Elise." I said slowly, "What's going on?" She hesitated. "Things are unraveling. You were the glue and nobody realized it until it came undone. I was the quiet one, remember? The one who didn't energize the team. They're paying for that mistake, hard." I didn't speak. Then Elise said something that made my breath hitch. "The board wants outside help. They reached out to Whitestone. I pitched you. They agreed." I sat up straight. "You pitched me?" "Yes, because you're the only person who can fix the place without burning it down. You know the people, the flaws, the ghosts." I exhaled. "I don't want revenge, Elise. I know." "That's why you're perfect for this." The next morning, I met with Malcolm Kincaid, founder of Whitestone Strategies, in a small coffee shop in the city's financial district. He had already read my portfolio. "You are the culture beneath the culture," he said, "invisible until you are gone." "That's generous," I replied. "It's not." I read the internal numbers. Post-departure team, output dropped 23%. Interdepartmental conflict rose 40%. The data tells a very clear story. He paused. Then, with a softness that caught me off guard, he asked, "Do you want to go back?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said, "but I want them to stop pretending they never needed people like me." He nodded. "Then let's go write a new kind of narrative, one they won't see coming." Elise greeted me on my first day at Whitestone HQ with a hug. It was quick, professional, but heavy with unspoken apologies. She didn't need to say she was sorry. I had already forgiven her. She showed me to my temporary office. It wasn't large, but it had a window and a whiteboard. Two things. I had never needed to think clearly, but now felt symbolic. I wrote 3 words at the top: observe, uncover, rebuild. By the end of the week, I had read every department audit from Halcyon. HR attrition was rising. Marketing had lost 3 key clients. Engineering was siloed. Creative had no unifying direction, and executive morale, undefined. Too fragile to measure. They hadn't just lost vision. They'd lost trust in themselves, in each other, in leadership, and the root. It wasn't just Austin. It was a system that taught people to speak over, not with, that punished pause, that rewarded performance over substance. I recognized it because I had lived it, and now I would deconstruct it quietly. Malcolm briefed the board. I was approved. No pushback, not even from Austin. That surprised me. "He knows," Elise said. "He just doesn't know how to admit it." The following Monday, we set the re-entry date. Elise walked me to the door. "You ready?" she asked. "I was always ready," I said. "They just weren't ready for me." As I turned the handle, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass, same woman, same face. But something had shifted. There was strength in her spine now, not from anger, but from clarity. I stepped through the door and into the hallway of the company that once decided I wasn't dynamic enough. This time, I wasn't there to belong. I was there to be undeniable. Some people build power through noise. I built mine in silence. It had been exactly 6 months since I'd walked out of Halcyon Peak Media with a cardboard box and 17 years of loyalty packed between ceramic mugs and paper certificates. I hadn't returned a single call, hadn't sent a single email. But today, I walked back through the same revolving doors, this time, not as their employee, but as the one person they hoped could fix what was left of their mess. The badge on my lapel read, Whitestone Strategies, Lead Consultant. My suit was ash grey, crisp, tailored to command a room without saying a word. Elise flanked me, tablet in hand, poised and composed. Malcolm trailed behind us, already scanning the lobby with strategist eyes. The receptionist greeted us with polite efficiency. She couldn't have been more than 25. "Welcome, Whitestone team, right?" "That's right," I replied. She gestured toward the elevators. "They're expecting you on 14. She had no idea who I was, and I didn't need her to. As we ascended the elevator, mirrors reflected back 3 professionals dressed for impact. But what I saw was something deeper. The full-circle moment of a woman once cast aside, now returning with measured precision. When the doors opened, everything was familiar and yet off. The marketing corner that used to buzz with energy now looked deserted. Desks were empty. The coffee machine sat untouched. A laminated sign still taped to the wall read, "March Motivation. Be loud, be bold, be seen." The irony was too thick to ignore. We passed a young analyst I remembered hiring. She looked up, blinked, and quickly looked down again. Shame had its own scent in corporate hallways. At 10 a.m. we entered the executive boardroom. 10 leather chairs, a long glass table, a skyline view of downtown Austin. The same sterile art still hung crooked on the west wall. Elise connected her tablet to the main display, while Malcolm greeted 2 board members already seated. I took the farthest chair facing the entrance. That seat had once belonged to Austin Merrick. He arrived 2 minutes late. I heard his shoes. Before I saw him, expensive soles on polished tile. He stepped in, eyebrows arched in that usual confident smirk. Then he saw me. His face flickered. Not shock. He was too well trained for that. But recognition. And beneath that discomfort, "Lenora," he said, voice as polished as ever. "Well, I'll admit, I didn't expect you asked for Whitestone," I interrupted. "This is what you get." He chuckled softly and extended a hand. I shook it briefly without warmth. We sat. Elise started with numbers. 29% employee turnover. Since Q2, 3 major accounts pulled, citing strategic incoherence. Internal survey, 61% of staff indicated loss of trust in leadership. 37% decrease in cross-departmental collaboration. Austin fidgeted. Board members exchanged glances. I watched their silence grow louder. Then it was my turn. I clicked to the first slide. Root cause, misjudgment of talent. I let it sit there for 10 seconds. I spent 17 years in this company. I didn't climb ladders. I built the foundation. And then one day, I was told I wasn't loud enough, not dynamic enough. I looked at Austin. That decision had consequences. I outlined Whitestone's recovery roadmap, 90-day executive performance reviews, anonymous team feedback mechanisms, mentorship reintegration programs, restructuring based on demonstrated value, not personality. Then came the inevitable question from a board member. "What about the CEO?" I didn't hesitate. "He stays for now, but under formal evaluation. Same standards, same reviews. Leadership is not legacy, it's performance." Austin straightened. "So I'm on trial." "You're being held accountable," I said. He said nothing. That was a first. When the meeting adjourned, most people slipped out quickly. Elise and Malcolm gathered their devices. I stood near the window staring down at the street where I once waited for an Uber on the day I was fired. Austin joined me. "You could have humiliated me in there," he said. I turned to face him, but I didn't. "Why?" "Because I don't need to prove anything. You already did it for me." He looked genuinely lost for a moment. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "You misjudged what quiet meant," I corrected. He gave a slow nod. "So what now?" "Now," I said. "Now you learn how to lead when no one's clapping for you." He didn't respond. He just looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time. As I walked toward the elevator, Elise caught up. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better than okay," I said. She smiled. "You were quiet, but you own that room." "Quiet doesn't mean invisible," I said. "It means I choose when to speak." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, turned around, and looked back at the hallway I used to walk down each day in silence. Not anymore. Now the silence was theirs. The next time I entered Halcyon Peak, no one looked away. They didn't speak either, but this time it wasn't avoidance, it was uncertainty, the kind that trembles behind polite smiles and busy keyboards. I didn't walk in loud or triumphant. I walked in like I belonged, because quietly I always had. It had been 3 days since the boardroom confrontation, since Elise Malcolm and I laid down the truth in numbers, too undeniable to ignore. Since Austin Merrick looked me in the eye and realized that leadership could not be performed, it had to be proven. That morning I returned not as a visitor, not as a ghost of layoffs past, but as Whitestone's embedded strategist, hired to stabilize the very structure that once exiled me. And I wasn't there to tear down, I was there to rebuild. The air on the 14th floor had changed, not in any physical way. Same dull carpeting, same framed jargon about vision and velocity lining the walls. But the energy was different. People paused longer before speaking. Laughter, if it surfaced at all, was muted. Even the high achievers had adopted a nervous edge, unsure whether the winds of change would lift them or expose them. By 10:00 a.m., I was leading the first open forum in the large training room on the West End. It had once been used for team celebrations and product launches. Today, it was just a circle of folding chairs, a table of black coffee and an invitation to speak. No titles, no hierarchy, just space. 18 people attended. 4 spoke. We're constantly reacting, one senior UX designer said, to trends, to clients, to Austin's latest whim. There's no long-term anchor anymore. I'm not even sure what my department is supposed to be said. Another quietly. It changes every quarter. And then came something that surprised even me. A man in his 50s, someone from finance I'd never spoken with, cleared his throat and said, "It's not that we didn't care. It's that we stopped believing our care mattered." The room was silent. No one mentioned me. No one praised my return. This wasn't a celebration. This was a diagnosis. I didn't interrupt, didn't defend or explain. I just listened. After they left, Elise stayed behind with her tablet. "That was a lot," she said. "It was honest," I replied. She tapped something into her screen. "We've got 2 more sessions scheduled this week. HR asked if you'd facilitate theirs." I nodded. Of course. As we walked back to our shared office, an unused 3rd-floor conference room, I passed the marketing pit. It used to hum like a hive. Today the silence was weighty. Most heads stayed down, some rose quickly, then dipped again. But one didn't look away. Her name was Laurel, mid-level copywriter. Kind, introverted. I'd once defended her right to turn down a late-night pitch rewrite. She stood up slowly. "I'm glad you're back," she said, barely above a whisper. "Thank you," I replied. She nodded, then sat back down, blinking quickly. Back in the office, Malcolm was reviewing feedback reports. "You're making waves," he said without looking up. "I'm not trying to." That's the point. Change doesn't have to shout. We worked until after 700 p.m., reviewing team charts, evaluating department flow. Elise left first. Malcolm followed. I stayed behind. Around 8:15. There was a knock at the glass door. It was Austin. He didn't wait for permission to enter, but he walked slowly, not arrogantly, warily. "I didn't come to argue," he said. "Good," I replied. He sat across from me. No blazer, sleeves rolled. For once, he looked like a man trying to understand instead of impress. "I read your session transcripts," he said, "and they're confronting, they're real." He nodded. "I guess I forgot how to hear things. I didn't want to believe." I studied him for a long moment. "Why are you really here? To ask, how do I begin to rebuild trust?" The question hung in the air longer than it should have. "Start by shutting up," I said. His eyes widened slightly. "Excuse me, stop talking, stop leading. Show up, listen, let someone else take the room, and when people speak, don't take notes. Remember what they said." He sat back, exhaling. "That's harder than it sounds, I know." He nodded slowly. "Okay." As he stood to leave, he paused. "Do you regret coming back?" "No," I said. But I regret having to come back like this, he understood. Later that night, I stayed even longer, walking the quiet halls of the building I had once helped build with spreadsheets, mentorship and loyalty no one could measure. I passed the kitchen, the stairwell. My old desk now occupied by someone else. I didn't need it back. I wasn't here to reclaim space. I was here to restore meaning. Because Halcyon didn't just lose structure, it lost soul. And that, above everything else, is what I came to rebuild. Some endings don't arrive with applause. They arrive in silence, in the long exhale, after years of holding your breath. It was my final morning at Halcyon Peak Media. The office smelled of reheated coffee and soft rain outside. I stood by the third-floor window, watching the parking lot slowly fill. Each car pulled in, each door slammed shut, each pair of shoes clicked across the lobby. I recognized most of them. They didn't all recognize me, but that didn't matter anymore. When I first returned here, I carried something heavy, not resentment, not anger, but a quiet question that haunted me. Was it me? Was I the problem? They'd needed to cut loose. Now that weight had lifted because in just 3 weeks I had seen something rare and real change that wasn't loud but rooted, conversations that weren't rehearsed but honest. A culture beginning to loosen its collar and remember how to breathe. Elise was already in our shared workspace when I arrived, reviewing the final evaluations. "They're going to ask you to stay," she said without looking up. "I won't," I replied gently. She paused. "Even if they offer you Austin's role. Especially then." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because this isn't my company anymore. It's theirs, and I didn't come back to reclaim power. I came back to remind them they had it all along." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't done. "You've changed this place, Lenora. More than anyone will ever put in a headline." "I don't need a headline," I said. "I just need to walk out with my head up." At 11:02 a.m., we met with the board in the 11th floor terrace room. No suits today, just people tired but attentive. Malcolm presented the metrics. Elise summarized, feedback trends. Then all eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. When I walked out of this building 9 months ago, I thought I was finished, not with the company, with myself. I believed the stories they told me, that I was too quiet to lead, too careful to innovate, too invisible to matter. I paused. But silence is not absence. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and care is not a liability. I handed over a final report in a sealed envelope. "This isn't a resignation, it's a release." No one clapped. That was perfect. As I made my way back down to the lobby, each floor felt lighter. I walked past HR where the door was open, and someone was laughing for the first time in weeks, past marketing where someone had erased the old quote from the whiteboard and replaced it with, "Make space, not noise." And then I reached facilities. Jamal was there, fixing a loose ceiling tile. He glanced down and smiled. "You leaving today?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "But you'll be here holding it all together like always." He shrugged. It helps when someone finally notices. I placed a folded note in his toolbox. "That's for you." He didn't read it, just nodded once deeply. Downstairs, the receptionist, same one from the day I first returned, looked up and offered a smile. "Ms. Blake, it's been an honor." Likewise, I stepped out into the rain. No umbrella. The city looked different than it had 3 weeks ago, or maybe I was different. Either way, the sharp edges I once feared had softened, not because anything had been handed back to me, but because I had taken back the only thing that mattered, and my voice. At the corner of 5th and Blakewell, I stopped for a red light. Cars passed. People rushed, but I stood still. Then from behind me, I heard footsteps. It was Austin. He held no umbrella either. "You could have destroyed me in that report," he said. "I didn't need to, I deserved it. I know." He looked away. Then back. "I learned more in 3 weeks from your silence than I ever did. From my own speeches, I didn't respond. I didn't need to." He continued softer this time. "You showed them something I never could." I finally turned to him. I didn't show them anything. I reminded them of what they already knew before the noise drowned it out. The light turned green. I stepped forward. He didn't follow. That night, I sat by my window at home with tea in my hand and the hum of the city outside. The reports were done, the job was finished, but something deeper had been completed too. I had returned not to settle a score, but to reclaim my story. I didn't need revenge, I didn't need a promotion. What I got was far greater. I got to walk out of a place that once crushed me, standing taller than I ever had. In the end, there was no parade, no confetti, no grand moment of vindication, just a woman walking away from a building she once thought defined her with nothing left to prove. Because the final word doesn't have to be loud. To be powerful, sometimes the last word is quiet. True leadership isn't loud. It's consistent, compassionate, and quietly courageous. Lenora's journey reminds us that being overlooked doesn't mean being unworthy. In a world that often rewards noise and charisma, this story teaches the quiet strength of integrity, self-respect, and resilience. When others doubt your worth, let your actions speak not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. Power reclaimed with dignity lasts longer than any public victory. Sometimes the most powerful transformation comes not from shouting back, but from walking away with grace, clarity, and the unshakable knowledge that you were always enough.